And it's good to see you again because like the last time we saw each other was during the NSCC.
Yeah, NSCC. Yeah,
Or is it the NS?
NSCC. I
Yeah,
know
NSCC,
some
yeah.
people call it NCSS, but it's the NSCC.
Okay, yeah, the
Which
NSCC.
was, like,
National Schools Constitutional
yeah,
Convention.
about 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
around the end of March, from
Yeah.
memory. Yeah.
So like, how did you find out about the opportunity and get in?
How did I find out about the opportunity? I found out about the opportunity through just research. Like,
Yeah.
I think towards like the end of last year, so that was when I was like at the tail end of me being in year 11. I tried to branch out and find some opportunities that related to like politics and like law and like public speaking, debating, and I came across the NSCC. And funnily enough, actually, I remember when I was actually researching it, the application form actually was like due that week.
Yeah.
Because I remember like they had a very, very short window for like the applications. So I ended up just like pulling an all-nighter, just trying to get that application in.
Yeah.
And I got in. I think what really stood out to me in the NSCC was that I was able to meet not just like politicians and like members of parliament, which is probably one of the big reasons that not just myself, but also like other students who were there, I'm not too sure, including yourself, that's one of the reasons they wanted to go. But another reason why I wanted to go or I wanted to attend, was because I was actually able to meet like-minded students like yourself, and not just from Victoria, but also, other states as well.
Yeah.
I think, especially at my school, when it comes to sort of not so much public speaking and debating, but more so like politics and whatnot, my school doesn't really get involved with that, especially, I guess, like the general like culture and atmosphere of the school. There's no real focus on politics and like political views and just like in general, like what's going on in the world right now, like, like the fuel prices and whatnot, like the oil crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, like in general, like when I talk to my friends about that, like they don't really like fully grasp the severity and like the situation of it. And so going into the opportunity, I was really like keen on just finding other people who had my sort of interest in, like international issues and politics. And I think I got that. Like, excluding myself, there was 112 other students, including yourself, from not just Victoria, but also all the other states and territories, Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Western Australia, etc. And I was really able to really just connect with them a lot more easily because, as I said, they like politics as well, and then they were more keen to actually have an open discussion with me about, these types of issues. So, yeah.
Yeah, and also with the like-mindedness, in your schools and stuff, you might know a lot of people, but a lot of people might have this kind of shyness to put themselves out there and like really do stuff or like improve themselves in ways where, it might be public speaking, it might be something else. And with this opportunity, you see a lot more like-minded people that were willing to put themselves out there, improve themselves, take a small risk, go to another state for 3 days and just make new connections there. Whereas like in school, sometimes in our friend groups, people might not be as motivating for you to go out and put your hand up for certain opportunities or go do something. You might be with your group, you might be looking at these opportunities. Hey, I want to do this. I want to try this. Do you want to think about it? And they might just be like, nah, Siebes, or, they just stick to the usual habits without trying to be more in a way.
Yeah, I do sort of reciprocate that sort of what you just said, especially at my school. In terms of like general participation, whether it be, sports, arts, social justice, like, clubs and whatnot, our school is actually pretty good at that. We have a point system and whatnot that connects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander roots. I won't go too in depth, but in general, like participation at my school is actually quite good compared to a lot of other schools, I guess, in general. But when it comes to, I guess, like, as you said, speaking in my friend groups and just in general speaking to my friends about, hey, did you hear about the oil crisis that's going on? Or, hey, did you hear what, I don't know, like North Korea or like China's doing? And they don't really get involved in those sorts of conversations.
Yeah.
And I don't really blame them. Again, like they have their own interests. But yeah, it's sort of like hard to sort of, I think for a lot of the other delegates and also myself, it's really hard to find like-minded people, as you said, who are just willing to engage in these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
And especially with like politics, especially in like civics engagement within young people.
Yeah.
Not just at my school, but I guess in general, not just in Australia, but also across the world. It's been going down a lot. And I think that's something that is actually really worrying because in more than one way or another, politics is like, it basically shapes our entire lives. Like all our lives run on money, and the government and politics are involved with money. I'm not too sure if you remember at the NSCC, I think it was one of the keynote speakers, I can't remember her name or their name, but she was like, basically, if there's no money, that means the government can't run the economy or the country, and then nobody can really like live their lives because again, there's no money thrown through the economy, such as Medicare, Centrelink payment services, etc. And yeah, that's just we're really really worrying. And I guess also extending, I know I'm going a bit off, but I guess extending that to sort of like voting as well. If young people aren't able to make an informed choice about, oh, what political party should I vote for? Like which, or how should I vote based on my views and values? Like in general, young people just don't know about that. And they might just choose somebody to vote on randomly. But that's really bad because I was talking to one of my members of parliament for the state, for a state electorate, and she was really hammering down this idea of every single vote counts. And I guess sort of going off on another tangent, I remember I think last week it was revealed that, again, I'm not trying to point out my political affiliation, but I remember on the news headlines there was this headline about One Nation winning their fourth seat in South Australia by less than like 100 votes. And if that doesn't show how important your every single vote is, then I don't know what is. But yeah.
Yeah, good points. And also going back to the vote thing, like if we, NSCC, going back to that, we had a referendum vote at the end of the debate and we ended up winning with double majority, but by one vote.
Yeah.
Which really goes to show how much one vote could swing an
Yeah.
entire decision, like changing the constitution.
Yeah. And I guess with the referendum or the mock referendum for changing Section 53 of the Constitution, in terms of like the double majority, yeah, it was more so a double majority for no. Because again, when we talk about a double majority, we talk about, a majority or at least four of the six of the states having voting yes. Yeah. And then obviously the national majority. But then, yeah. And especially with that mock referendum as well, there was in total 113 of us. So there was no way of there being a tie for the actual national majority vote as well. But yeah, I do agree with your point on how, even one vote can really make a difference. And yeah, I guess with that as well, coming up with my sort of vote on the ballot paper, whether to vote yes or no. I was really on the fence about that because again, I'm not too sure if you were as well, but like the amount of compelling arguments for yes and no, like it was pretty much neck and neck. And again, like if I voted yes, even though the referendum wouldn't have gone through, we still would have gotten the national majority for yes, because it would have been 57 yes votes to 56 no votes. But I ended up choosing no, and I guess that swung to the no camp anyway. So.
Yeah. And also, like, I wanted to quickly point out the cap that I'm wearing.
Oh, yeah.
On the Canberra trip. I think you also got one as well.
I think so, yeah. It was at the airport from memory. Yeah, airport, yeah.
Yeah, to a shop. Little Canberra reference. What were your first feelings or thoughts when you first got to the Melbourne airport and first saw the other delegates that you might be joining? How did you feel and what were you thinking at the time?
I guess like on the day, obviously we had to I had to wake up at like 5:30 in the morning just to get that out of the way. Basically, it was still dark out when I got to the airport. I was feeling a bit of like a mix of emotions. Obviously, I was excited I was excited to not only meet my fellow delegates, but also I was really pumped, I guess, to also meet other MPs and other people who work at Parliament House on that day as well, because we did go to Parliament House on that Tuesday on the first day. But I was also, I guess, a bit, I wouldn't say nervous, but I was a bit, I guess, like apprehensive. I guess like initially I was apprehensive, like to meet new people, especially like new young people. Like obviously I was like going into there, as I mentioned before, going into the convention, I was sort of hoping, I can meet like-minded people who were as interested or even more interested in politics and, legal studies and whatnot than I was. But again, it wasn't a guarantee. But then when I actually, got to the airport and I saw you chatting with Luke, and, I sort of went up to you guys and you said hello, and then, we started interacting and, we started interacting with some of the other delegates who were just arriving as well and the ones who were already there. And it was actually really, really nice. It's sort of, in terms of my expectations of being around people who, were really inviting, that sort of blew my expectation away, and that sort of cascaded or like snowballed into me having like an extremely good experience with the people like in the Victorian delegation, but also like in general just from all the other states and territories as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely a bit of a shock, because like as young people, we know in high school that a lot of people can be pretty judgy, like
yeah, definitely, yeah.
about everyone else, especially like if they don't really know them, they stick to their friend group. But now you didn't really have a friend group to stick to, and everyone just became so open to just chatting with everyone and just meeting everyone, and it was like pretty surprising in a way, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it was definitely. But I guess also on that, meeting people from like other schools as well, but also not just other schools, but also like other parts of Victoria. Because I think all my life I've sort of grown up in the western suburbs of Melbourne. When we were chatting before, I sort of mentioned how I don't really travel to the east side
Yeah.
of Melbourne as well. And that's sort of like very, very limited to me in terms of like the kind of people that I can meet, like
Yeah.
in terms of like the kind of new people I can meet. And so like really like at the airport when we were in just that group of Victorian delegates,
Yeah.
being able to meet people who were just from all across Victoria, from regional, the east such as yourself, also like
The west.
Sunbury, Geelong as well. It was really engaging, and it was really really new experience for me because like as I said, I've grown up in West Melbourne all my life, and just like meeting those kind of new people who weren't also from, in general, just who weren't also from Melbourne as well, was really really good as well. And also I got to sort of know like, because I'm really really big on student leadership at my school and also like leadership outside of school as well. So also meeting like other college captains and other school leaders and like seeing how their schools like do leadership and like how they plan their events. It was like really, really eye-opening for me, and I really, really enjoyed those discussions. And I think that sort of further cascaded or that further snowballed into me, like really, really gets being like really, really, how would you call it? Being more open to actually chatting with like the Victorian delegates and like the other delegates as well. Because again, like in general, that's just like that sense of unfamiliarity sort of also helped me sort of step out of my comfort zone. In general, like I don't really have like a fear towards meeting new people. But but there is that sort of like lingering sense of, you really don't know them. How do you come off as like, inviting and like actually wanting to know them rather than wanting to know them because you sort of have to.
So when we went to the Parliament House and we did like the tours and stuff, and we also saw like the question time, and Milton Dick, the speaker, also spoke to us and all of that. I wanted to ask you about your favorite aspects of that, but also what were your biggest takeaways when you experienced the Parliament and like the question time live and seeing kind of how the government works.
So aspects and takeaways.
Yeah.
I think my favorite aspects of Parliament House was just, I think, because we were given tours of Parliament House, very, very short one though, not like, around the entire building, but like mainly like the foyer and like the different like artifacts. But I think the aspects would include really just like knowing the history of like why Parliament, like the new Parliament House was actually built. Obviously to cater for a growing, not just a growing Australian population, but also a growing number of members of Parliament who represent the Australian people. And not just like that, but like also just like more like symbolic aspects that we learnt about. I think our tour guide, they talked about like how like in the foyer, like the different marble colors would actually represent, the House of Representatives, and then the red marble, which was flown in from Italy or another country, was represented the Senate. And that really stuck out to me because like so much care went into, creating Parliament House, and in general, just so much care went into this place that would ultimately represent the voice of the Australian people, and that really stood out to me. And I guess also like when we were walking around not that fountain area, but that area with like the running water in the middle, and like with the sort of like
The like square.
the square balcony, not the balcony, but it was like that square like overhang thing.
Yeah.
And like all like the other like the portraits of like Queen Elizabeth, Bob Catter.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny. Scott Morrison, all these other prime ministers. I think really just seeing like those portraits in person and just like seeing like the history of like the country was like, it was really like mesmerizing for me because again like those prime ministers, those famous people, Queen Elizabeth, like they once walked the corridors of Parliament House, pretty much every single day. And, it's being a part of that, I guess, experience and that like spiritual sense of, I guess, like belonging, if I could call it that. It was like really, really like, it was really like heartwarming.
Yes.
For me.
I have no idea what's going on with
I
this roof
think it's the wind.
Is it the wind?
Yeah, I'm not getting too wet, so I'll be fine.
Hopefully it doesn't keep moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, okay. Okay, maybe, actually, no, I think I can move back a bit.
Yeah, we could probably move the chair.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay, that's...
So aspects, and what was the other?
Takeaways?
Takeaways from, definitely. I think my key takeaways, I guess, even before the question time was getting, I guess, like a bit of like a talk or like a speech from Milton Dick, the Speaker of the House of Reps. I think he's the member for Oxley, the member for Oxley. And I think I really, like his speech before we went into question time really stood out to me. I'm just going to ignore the rain.
Okay.
It really stood out to me because I could see his passion for like really engaging young people in like civics education and like politics. I think because I know he runs this program called Parliament in Schools, where he actually visits different schools across Australia, and not just like in the major cities, but also in regional areas as well. I remember he said that he visited a school with only like 2 students in it in one of the regional areas in one of the cities. And that was really, really eye-opening for me because again, like now like I think like obviously like from like my experiences at school, like that lack of like interest in politics, I guess like from students is like it's really, really absent in like sort of my sort of environment. But then like seeing like one of our country's leaders, one of our members of parliament rising up and basically like wanting to actually like improve that, it was like really eye-opening for me. And
Definitely, yeah.
And like also just like when he was performing his own question time, or like when he was performing his own like section where he was answering our questions, like I could tell like he really had a passion for like not just young people but also like us being there, and us not just representing our federal electorates but also just like in general being interested and in politics and being there to be like a future prime minister or future member of parliament or like a future speaker of House of Reps. And I think that really like that didn't just warm his heart, I think, but that also warmed our hearts as well. I could just like see that he cared. But I think in terms of, I guess, moving on to the question time, I think, one of the funny things, I'll just get one of the funny things out of the way first.
Yeah, definitely.
I think when he was addressing us 1 or 2 hours before, so in that same session, I think one of the questions that one of the student delegates asked was how often do you like kick out people in question time? And I think one of his answers was not often, or it was either not often or I don't like to kick people out of question time. And then obviously during question time, within the first like I think 10 to 15 minutes, he kicked out about like 2 members of parliament from the opposition. So that was really like, I think it was humbling for him, and it was really funny, like especially with us in the gallery on the top left, I think. In the top left. It was really, really funny because again, we could also like see like the government, so the Labor Party, like sort of like throwing shade at the opposition, and it was like quite funny to see them get like the opposition get riled up. Again, I guess like in general, like the question time as well. The question time was like really, really like euphoric in a way. I think whenever like you see like question time and speakers and like members of parliament speaking, and like the two sides fighting on TV, it's sort of like, why are they arguing like this much? Like why are they acting like babies, right? But then like when we were actually there, it was quite hard for me to fathom like, hold on, this is what they do on TV. It was like really hard to like process like, oh, we were actually there, and like, we were actually there, and like we could actually like hear them argue. We can hear them throwing shade at each other. We could hear the speaker Milton Dick calling out members for speaking when they weren't supposed to speak. He was issuing out standing orders. He was just calling out members of parliament. It was funny because again, I think what a lot of people describe question time is as a bunch of babies or a bunch of children arguing, which probably is like the best like analogy for it. But also like it was just really, really interesting to see like that, and also just like in general, I guess like plus the banter, but also like the questions that were being asked by the opposition, but also like the members who weren't on the front bench of the Labor Party. It was really interesting to see like how the opposition would like ask questions, and then how the Labor Party or like whoever was called to speak on their portfolio would actually answer. It was really interesting because like at the end of every single, I guess, like question or like question answer that somebody in the Labor Party who was in charge of a portfolio would end up saying, they would always end it off in like the most like, yeah, I got you there. Because like in general, like the opposition would ask questions that sort of like try to downplay the Labor Party's like commitments and like the policies and whatnot. But the Labor Party member who would always answer those questions, they would always like bite back. And also like in general, like when they would finish their speech, like you could tell like the vibe, like they would end their speech on like a good note, or like a good note, or like a note where like, they came out on top.
Yeah, definitely.
Just gonna move that.
Yeah, I've never seen this before where the rain's just kind of like a diagonal right
Yeah,
in
I
between.
think the rain's up there, but then like since like there's no wind, it's sort of like pulling down.
Yeah. So I mean that's interesting, I guess. Interesting scenery for the video, but yeah. And it was definitely interesting because you also saw a bit of the like party politics where they were kind of having like banter, like saying like, you know, Liberals never do this, or like, you know, Labor's at it again, or like, and also you saw a lot that their own parties would ask their own people
Yeah.
questions to make themselves look good, or give an answer about like, you know, hey, what are we doing that's so great? And then they say, oh, well, thank you for that question. Here's what we've been doing so great.
Yeah, definitely. I think that happens more so for like the party that's in government.
Yeah.
So obviously the Labor Party members on the backbench would ask their own party questions, and I guess not to like inflate their egos, but also just to like boast about like their achievements to the opposition as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the members in the backbench for the Labor Party asked like what the Labor Party government was actually doing to address the fuel crisis. But then obviously the climate change and energy minister Chris Bowen would sort of say like, oh, I would like to thank the member for XYZ for their question, and then they would sort of like compliment that member of parliament for some reason, and then they would sort of give like facts and statistics as to, oh, this is what Australia is doing to actually address the fuel crisis. This is what Australia is doing to mitigate the effects of inflation and rising prices for fuel prices for that Australians had to afford and whatnot. And yeah, I do agree like that. I guess like bit of party politics really pulls through in question time. Yeah, and it really pulls through, and it really just comes to life, and really just shows like how like the different parties, especially when it comes to the Labor Party on the left, and then the opposition, so which is the coalition, which is made up of the Liberals and Nationals, like their ideologies. So obviously, Labor's more into like Medicare, like wages, job growth, housing growth, etc. But then the opposition is more like conservative, and they're more into like I forgot what their policies was because I'm not really familiar with the opposition.
I think
and
like
their policy.
nuclear for 40-year plan, and then like cutting taxes on like some things.
Yeah, something like that. But I think one of their major sort of like ideological like factors or like features is like energy, like more so like fossil fuel energy. Yeah, it's really interesting. It was really interesting to see like those party politics like really come to life. Because I think like in general, like especially within school, we learn about like the different like we might learn about the different parties. Obviously, like you have Labor, the Coalition, the Greens, in like different independents in the crossbench, but we don't actually see like those policies like play out. We sort of just like learn about, oh, you know, this is what the Labor Party does, and this is what they're for, and this is what the opposition does, and this is what they're for. But we don't actually like see that, not so like manifest, but like we don't really see that like come to life.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Amelia. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Pretty well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. You've missed out on a little bit of action, as you can see from the whole setting, but that's all right. Good to see you again. Last time we saw each other was the NSCC. If that's correct, yeah.
Yeah,
National
NSCC,
Schools
NSCC,
Constitutional
yep.
Convention. Yep. So, as another Victorian delegate like ours, I was wondering what was your takes and what were your first feelings and thoughts when you first kind of started seeing everyone for the first time at like the airport?
Well, I was a regional delegate, so I stayed overnight on Monday
Right,
and
yeah.
I met all the other regional delegates who were lovely. And so we kind of had this like bonding thing over dinner. But it was really interesting because everyone's sort of got a very similar interest in sort of the Constitution, which is a random interest to have, I think. But it was really interesting, and the thing I noticed a lot, especially with all the delegates, was the perspective that people had depended a lot on where they were from. The ones that were really regional, like Beechworth, Mildura, had a really different perspective to people from like Ballarat, which I thought was really interesting. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
nice.
So like you guys were already out, or you were at a separate hotel near the airport?
Yeah, we stayed at the airport hotel on Monday night.
Yeah, right. Did you get up to anything there? Like, were you doing like a bingo or no?
I
Just
think they
leaving.
did, but we had to get up at 5:30 the next morning, so
Fair enough, fair
Yeah.
enough. And then I was also wondering, because on the first day, we also did the Parliament House like kind of tour and like all of that. I was wondering what were your takeaways and kind of thoughts and feelings you had while going through the kind of semi-surreal experience of seeing how the government and how like the country works.
At the start, I had been to Parliament House before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but just like to see it. So the tour was really good, I thought. And it's really cool. I hadn't been there on a sitting day, so sort of seeing how it worked when everyone was working was really cool as well. And question time was great.
Mm.
Could have been more dramatic, but that's
I guess fair enough. Yeah, yeah. Maybe the Senate. Is it the Senate? Yeah. Maybe the Senate may be more interesting.
No,
Maybe.
no, I think the House of Reps is more interesting.
Maybe.
than
Yeah. I mean,
question
it
time.
depends who's like in the Senate, like who's not banned.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. I think the viewers would know a lot about that, yeah.
They might.
they might.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
bit of an inside thing. I wanted to learn and ask both of you this question, but on the like day 2 and I think maybe a little bit of day 1 and 3, who were your favorite speakers during the like event, or which one had the speech or keynote that really stuck out to you and kind of was the most memorable?
I think it would have been the Governor General when we went to her residence in Canberra, because she actually does live on that residence. I think what really stood out in her speech was, I think like her care and her support for the NSCC program, but also like young people getting involved in politics, democracy, civics education, and also like the Constitution as well. And I remember in her speech when we were all like gathered around like that lectern with like the flags behind her. I think what really stood out to me were 2 words. I think when she was like addressing us as like young people and like in general, just like young people trying to get involved into politics or who are curious about politics, she said for us to be curious. And that really that still stuck with me to this day, because again, like without curiosity, we won't be able, like as young people, we won't be able to, you know, not just like identify like the issues in our local communities, but also just like advocate and speak up for our local issues as well. You know, so she was just like an amazing person. Like I remember when we were in Government House, she signed all of our constitutions. Not only that, but she also, because we had like a whole like conga line of like just like going out the door of her office, I think it was, and she was just like signing. Not only was she like signing our constitutions, but she was like willing to answer like at least like one question from all of us, and that just like shows like how much she like cared for us being there, but also like how supportive supportive of the program she was as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And her assistant will always take like thousands of photos.
Yeah, the army, one of the cadet guy. Yeah. Oh, also, I remember that one clip, or that one photo or video that was going around of her in her golf cart or like her buggy. Yeah. Oh my God, that was so funny. And then I would remember people were posting on their stories like, oh, the first in my bloodline to see the Governor General riding in a buggy or something. that was also another highlight as well. But yeah, that was me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yourself, Emily?
probably the senators on, what was it, end of day 2 or day 3? I can't remember. Having the understanding of the constitutional crisis from both parties was really interesting, and they were just very entertaining.
Definitely.
It was great. Or the Governor General. She was really good.
Yeah, those are definitely some good picks, because like the other 2, they had like this banter between each other. Like,
because they were legit, like, they were ex-senators from memory of like the opposite parties in South Australia. So like one was Labor, one was Liberals. Like they were just like going off like each other. But like I think like the really interesting dynamic between that was like they were still friends.
Yeah.
Like even though they had like differing political opinions on either side of the river, they were still able to have deep debates and conversations, not just with us, but also with each other, but still respect each other's opinions. I'm like, it's really rare to see that as well, because especially like when it comes to like friendships, I've seen a lot of friendships, and again, this is going off a bit, like I've seen a lot of friendships sort of like drift apart because of differing political views. And I think it's a real rare skill to have, to not only like be friends with someone with differing political views, but also just like respecting those political views as well was really it was really interesting.
It is. And especially in like the politician side, like it's kind of rare to see nowadays versus in the olden days when politicians who are opposite like parties and stuff still getting along. And also having civil debates rather than picking at character traits. Because like, I can think of one good example in the US of someone who rose in politics who kept picking at more like personal traits of different like opposition and stuff. What was another one like? Basically, you know, he does it a lot, way too much. Yeah, you know, like this guy,
don't get me started on your speech.
Yeah.
You should show the podcast a photo when you edit, just like
maybe
put a little clip of you speaking in that certain accent.
Yeah. Bump up the saturation to make my face orange for no reason at all.
Yeah.
Also, old Parliament House. So we were like walking around it, but we were also like sitting in the seats as well. How did you find that kind of experience, being in the old Parliament House and seeing kind of the history of like how the government was in the country?
It was really interesting. As again, before Amelia got here, I was talking about like how the new Parliament House was built to accommodate for like a growing Australian population.
Yeah.
Obviously, like we couldn't fit as much MPs and senators into that old Parliament House, which would become old Parliament House in the museum. It was really interesting to see because again we got to go into the House of Reps chamber, or like the green chamber, and also like the Senate chamber with the red, and also just hearing from like the tour guides as well, like like that history behind, in general, like what I said, just like why a new Parliament House had to be built, but also just like sitting in those same seats because obviously like in the new Parliament House, especially during question time, we weren't able to actually like sit in those seats because we weren't MPs, right? But then like in old Parliament House, when we were getting toured and also when we were speaking, well, when we were hearing from the keynote speakers, I think her name was Professor Toomey. One of them was Professor Toomey. We were actually able to sit in those seats and like sitting in the seats of like past MPs from like like last century was like really it was like again like as I said before Amelia got here, it was really
Surreal.
surreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I guess like on the tour, aside from like going in the different chambers of the House and the Senate, getting like a tour of like the entire, I guess, like premise of old Parliament House as well. I guess like seeing like the different statues and like just like the different architecture and like the difference in architecture between the old Parliament House and the new Parliament House, just up the hill. Like it was really interesting.
Yeah. Emily, your takeaways?
It was also very fitting, I think, being able to be where, because obviously the convention was about Section 53, but also the constitutional crisis in 1975. So you're in the House of Representatives where Prime Minister Whitlam was being Prime Minister. So I think it was very fitting for that as well. It also sort of meant that you got an understanding of the environment and just how crowded it was getting, because it is very small. And I didn't actually realise how small it was going to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. But also, yeah, it sort of just provided some historical context and the tour at the end of the whole museum. And I found really interesting going into the old press offices, where the ABC was broadcasting from. It was really cool, and it's super cool how it's been preserved to look how it was. And yeah, I think the historical context was really important.
Now I want to go to like day 3, and I think we also did this in day 2. But I think this was also in the old Parliament House, but in the separate section. We did our own debates in a way, but we were grouped up with people from other states and territories who were not delegates from our state, and we didn't really spend as much time with. But then we automatically started kind of teams against, maybe not against each other, but depending on your political views on the section, we kind of worked together on that. And I was wondering about your experiences and your thoughts and feelings you had during the whole process of you're working in the team, you're writing notes, you're learning about Section 53 for probably the first time, and you're figuring out how to make compelling arguments for or against, and then you're getting your mindset convinced or changed by different people's points of view. So I was wondering how you guys felt through all of that.
It was really interesting and also engaging for me because I think you were talking about the group discussions, right, with the different on the different like numbered tables. You're talking especially within those sessions where we had to, because after the session, like each of those sessions, we had to like make not like a speech, but also just like report back on like what like our discussions were. So I think like in those discussions when we were like, because again, like as you said, like it was basically minimum of one student from each state and territory, and it was really interesting to see like the different like views and opinions of other people from other states, because again, like I think I didn't really like fully grasp or like realize like how big of a difference someone's political opinions and views can be, even in the same country, but also just like in being in different states and territories. Obviously, like when Australia was becoming a federation in the lead up to 1901, when Australia actually became a country, obviously New South Wales and Victoria were the two biggest, I guess, like colonies at the time. They're also the same. Well, they're the same now in the respect that like they're the biggest like states in like Australia. And that really stood out to me because again, that difference in like the views and values of like Victoria and New South Wales, it was so different to what like Western Australia, like the delegates of Western Australia were saying, and the delegates in Queensland and South Australia were saying. And it like really opened my eyes into like, not everything's about like Victoria or not everything's about like New South Wales. Like there's other states in our country, like and territories in our country, like they also make a difference as well, and like they also like their voices also matter as well. And yeah, it really just like opened my eyes, I think.
Definitely,
Yeah.
yeah. And really,
Mine's almost like the opposite, but maybe that was just my group because I think I expected there to be more of a difference. And then sort of while we were talking, it's like, oh, I completely forgot that you were from a different state until break time when we're talking about the subjects that we're doing. I'm like, that's a weird subject to be doing. And then I realised that they're not doing VCE.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really similar. But I mean, it does come down to where, even like I said about the regional delegates, is that I can assume that a lot of the people in my group were from urban parts of their states. I didn't have anyone that was super rural or regional, which will have a huge difference in their perspectives on things. But yeah, it was really interesting. And the dynamic that we had sort of was interesting as well. People had very, like, they gravitated towards leadership roles, or they really wanted to speak, or they really didn't. So that was really interesting. It's like, it was a big experiment in socialization, I thought, but it was really interesting.
definitely, yeah. It's amazing kind of how like-minded, even though they're like from different states and territories, I found, was that like, hey, you're from Queensland, Northern Territory, New South Wales, Western Australia, South Australia, but it feels like I'm just talking to someone else who just lives around the corner.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was a bit of a surprise until you kind of dive deep in like kind of their local regional news, like talking about, I guess, NDIS situation in New South Wales, or like talking about the crocodiles in Queensland, but that was more North Queensland.
Yeah, that one Queensland senator, Bob Catter. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a pretty surreal and interesting experience that you don't really experience or can't really get the opportunity to. Like, it's like a once in a lifetime sort of thing. I'm wondering if they'll make future kind of government funded projects like this as well.
I think they have. I know I spoke to you before Emily got here about the Speaker of the House of Reps, Milton Dick. He started the first National Youth Parliament this year. And I remember in his address to us, like a few hours before question time, he was like, ever since I became the Speaker of the House of Reps in 2022, I've been fighting to actually get this through. Like, it's taken him basically 3 years to actually get this through. And like, obviously, like, you probably already know, like, in your different like in the different states and territories, they have their own like state youth parliaments. But again, like having one on like a national level was like I'm sure like a lot of work went into it, and I think it's a really good opportunity as well. And I think
Also like making connections with the people in other states and like
definitely
coming to a consensus where you agree like, oh, this is beneficial for all of us, not just like us in the urban or us in the regional, or like us Vic and New South Wales teaming up and like screw everyone else. Like,
It's such a big country as well. So it's
huge.
really difficult to get the representatives from each part of the country.
Yeah, I think Amy from Beechworth, I think she actually got into the...
Did she?
Yeah, I think she did. I think she posted on her story, I think. I can't remember what her federal electorate was, but represent Vic.
Yeah.
Sweet. Because like, I don't know, I just forgot what I was
Yeah,
saying.
okay.
Okay, now I'm moving back to the soapboxes and stuff, but also I'm wondering, why Section 53?
What do you mean by that? Like,
I mean, why is it important for us to be debating Section 53 versus the other sections?
It's not. And I genuinely, it's not that important. And I think that's probably why they chose it. Because it's not something that's like super divisive. It's like, we'll be okay either way. And it's not like they were debating marriage laws or healthcare laws or education or something. But I'll say, because it was kind of, I think I read through it the first time and I'm like, this is so boring. Why would you think that's about those? But it's really interesting once you get into it. It's a good choice.
It got pretty heated as well.
Like especially the mock referendum that we had, like that really reflected like how like divisive like all the delegates in total were. Like again, like getting beaten by like one vote, 56 to 57. But in general,
And it's funny how people would steal different parts from each other's like.
I
votes.
remember that.
I love that.
Like someone mentioned like the monkey with a gun or something, and like.
They were continuing that joke. Yeah.
4 different people.
Yeah, but
It
it
went
was
on
really
wild,
funny
yeah.
though. Yeah.
It was funny, yeah. I did steal it though, like when I said like an army of monkeys with a gun.
Yeah.
And then I said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And someone stole it and said, if it ain't broke, you should fix it or something. Like they just flipped the meaning. But it was pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah, it was really fun as well. Like
Yeah, it
even though
was.
like people were like stealing their own jokes, I think like during the soapbox sessions, like that was when people had like probably like some like the most fun. I reckon like everybody was just like laughing, like being supportive of each other, and obviously like there were some speakers who were less confident than others.
Yeah.
Some speakers who like were like speaking like at like 200 words per minute or something. But like in general, like in the end, like everybody would like clap and like cheer and whatnot. I think
Yeah.
that's like that supportive environment was like that sort of uplifted other people as well. Yeah.
It definitely helped a lot, like get people out of their comfort
Yeah.
zones and stuff. Yeah. Okay, this will be a quick short one. What was your favorite meal during the 3 days?
Meal.
Yeah.
The lemon part that I had at the National Press Club was really good. But that was the only part of that meal that I liked.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
I think probably same in like the National Press Club because like all the food that we had at the hotel and for dinner and for like well not for dinner but for like for lunch and like for breakfast was like sort of like normal
Kids'
breakfast.
Lunchable snack box.
I mean like pretty much but like more like fancy and not fancy but like more like
Bigger.
bougie, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think probably like during the like the main course
Yeah.
after the entree for the National Press Club we had either steak or chicken. I think it was Wagyu steak actually, then or chicken. That was probably the best food in terms of like.
You enjoyed it, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Did you have the steak?
Yeah, I had the steak.
Oh, you lucky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
steaks are good.
I had some for once.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, yeah. I had some of my half of my steak and then I traded for someone else's chicken.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want it, so like.
Yeah. Oh, that was Mitch.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
Mitch.
it was Mitch. Yeah, because like, okay, initially, like, okay, before he asked you, he asked me, oh, could I?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was like, oh, if you get the steak, could we trade? And I was like, oh yeah. But then like I ended up flaking on the last minute. But then he ended up asking you.
Yeah.
Cause like when I saw the steak, I was like, oh, hold on, this might actually taste
Really good.
Yeah, this might actually taste like really, really good. So I don't know, maybe just like he doesn't like chicken or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. Or maybe it's still not Wagyu.
Yeah, probably.